Delusion requires belief. Belief is an interpretation of phenomena that collapses it down into a single perception, which is nothing but sense data being projected into awareness. It is in this sense that perception is reality, because no matter what reality did, the interpretation of its projection into awareness is all that can be perceived. Belief is the author of reaction to phenomena. In the utter absence of belief is the utter absence of reaction to phenomena. In that utter absence of reaction is an utter stillness and an utter ascension of energy in vibration and position within the frame. Everything that is a reaction to phenomena, be it one that causes suffering or one that relieves suffering, one that brings pleasure, is occurring within the confines of belief in being a self to relate to it. All augmentation of energy that occurs within the framework of body identification resonates at a level less than love. There are emotions that occur within the human spectrum that are, to the extent that they require conceptual self, exclusive to human beings. The feelings that arise from not fitting in with creation in some way are unique to human beings. There are things that a child does not get, like sarcasm. Their brain's not developed to interpret it. And likewise, there are things relating to a conceptual self that simply don't exist for animals. Therefore, there are flavors of emotion in the human palate that are not generated by animals. So the Anthropocene has seen not only the introduction of novel objects, symmetrical objects that man makes, but also different flavors of emotional energy being projected into the astral realm. Matter is, as far as we know, only ever perceived as energy that's projected into awareness through the form of life that arises from physical matter. There's a conversion process of energy from the sun into plants and photosynthesis and secondary consumers, and then that energy is used to project into awareness and interpretation of reality. But it's only ever tasted as that energy. And there are different expressions of that energy. There is the raw qualia that is projected as sense data. So the sounds, the feelings, the taste, the smell, all from the senses. And then there are the emotional feelings resulting from the interpretation of what's happening relative to a physical and conceptual self. The nominal sense data coming from the five senses and the feelings that arise from its interpretation are occurring concurrently, like different aspects of a movie, such as the sound and the visual. The only reality that appears in awareness consists of the projection of this sense data and the energy that's perceived in the reaction to it or the utter absence of reaction to it. When observing life from its smallest to greatest unit, from the most complicated organism to the tiniest holon within an organism, they all seem to have one objective, and that is to live. And even within the organism itself, even if it has a single purpose like a cell, it will, when presented with its demise, attempt to adapt and continue to survive. This is one way that cancer cells occur. But the point is that there seems to be an imperative to remain conscious. Along the same lines, beings that lack a self-concept, that is, all beings but humans, have available to them a stillness of mind by virtue of having no conceptual character to operate within it. It's likely that animals do have dreams where they operate in much the same way as they do in waking, but it's not likely that they have daydreams where they operate a conceptual self within a conceptual world. If their environment has afforded it to them, animals absolutely have the ability to sit still and do nothing, and can be relied upon to do so consistently. A modern human being has difficulty with this. There is something in them that imagines something needs to be done. There's something that needs to be stored up. There's some contingency that needs to be made. There is some goal that must be worked towards. So even if the body is sitting still, the mind is going to be in motion, and that consumes energy and transmutes energy into these various and novel flavors relative to whatever came before humans. That is all there is to the reality that has appeared to you in awareness, is the sense data and the feelings that stem from its interpretation. And those feelings that are unique to humans come from the belief in being a physical and conceptual self. I call that belief delusion, but regardless of whether or not there's truth to it, to being the conceptual and physical self, regardless of whether or not science can prove whether that's real, there is definitely a discovery that can be made in the absence of that belief. There is possible the discovery of that contentment which makes mandatory the preservation of consciousness from the smallest to the largest unit, and also makes possible the stillness we see exhibited by animals that lack a self-concept. There is a default state they inhabit that is not known to humans from behind the veil of a self-concept that constantly reacts to how circumstance serves it. The things that feed on human emotional energy of the lower astral seem to have no food source but humans, because the feelings that we create are unique to us. Animals do have primal emotions, but humans have many different nuanced flavors. It's the feeling of something that we value. When people are aroused by strange things, it's the strangeness of the thing that arouses them in many cases. It's not merely the sensation. The sensation can be had from other sources, but it's the specific source that is so appealing for some reason. Now, there are behaviors that animals display that would mirror those that in humans we would call aberrant. And if you examine that animal behavior within the context of its survival, it's clear to see how that action, despite being judged as aberrant by us, is conducive to the perpetuation of that species. But in human beings, there are strange fixations and strange feelings that come from those fixations that are not likely generated in, say, a stork that eats all but the strongest of its young, or a male bear or a lion that devours cubs to stimulate ovulation in the mother. By our standards, nature is just horrific. But the feelings that come from our judging of it are unique to us. They don't exist in animals. And thus, animals maintain both the will to live and also the will to remain still when there is nothing to do. Human beings lose this ability in the cultivation of a conceptual self from the root I that facilitates relational thinking in the apparent world of duality that's discovered by the child. As that conceptual self is woven into existence from experience, there is a loss of this natural state, and there's an amnesia of it. But if you talk to a child, they may, and you may even recall your ability to feel people staring at you, or maybe you got certain feelings from trees, or they communicated with you in some way. The perception of these things disappears from reality when the identification with a conceptual self collapses down the possibilities to a particular interpretation. There are feelings and therefore vibrational levels that underlie that interpretation. But in the absence of identification with a self to relate to that phenomena, there is no interpretation. And so the energy that would normally be collapsed down to a definite state in reaction to that interpretation does not get collapsed down, and therefore maintains its quality of having all potentiality. This is what motivates animals to do nothing, and the absence of which motivates human beings to do everything. That is on a linear and non-circular path. Those linear and novel things that humans do, they do in an effort to align reality with their mind's ideal, and for that time of alignment get in their experience that which animals have by default, simply by virtue of not demanding that reality collapse down into a particular state. So while the default state of the animal is a stillness that reflects the love that flows from the headwaters of the animal's attention, the human being reflects a vibration that is consistent with their beliefs. However, the human has the ability to appreciate it in a way that an animal cannot, because the animal cannot experience the shadow that the human experiences, the shadow that's cast by the conceptual self. Animals are content, but they can't know why they are content. A human being who has died unto themselves, who has died unto the identification with the idol of self, has the experience of all potentiality that the animal has, but also has the conceptual knowledge of what came before, has the ability to appreciate the present in light of the past. It cannot be expected that humanity would make this round trip en masse, but it is possible for any individual listening to this video.